Welcome to this deep dive. It's all about attention training. Specifically, we're diving into Shamatha meditation, as it's described in B. Alan Wallace's book, The Attention Revolution.
Yeah.
You can think of this deep dive as a crash course in really getting to know your own mind.
Yeah.
And along the way, we'll be sharing some pretty fascinating stories about, what happens when people really go all in on this practice. What happens when they commit to it?
It's definitely a journey, and it has some incredible potential. The goal of shamatha is to cultivate this really, really stable and vivid attention. And what's cool about this is it's not about, just like trying to stop thinking altogether,
Right.
which is basically impossible anyway.
Yeah.
Instead, shamatha is about working with your mind, like really working with the nature of your mind, how it is.
Yeah, it's not about emptying your mind.
Mhm.
It's more about training it.
Right.
And get this, it's a 9-stage process.
Oh, wow.
And each stage builds on the last one. I have to admit, when I first heard about these 9 stages, I was a little intimidated. I was like, 9?
Fine.
Really?
Oh,
It
yeah.
can be, but it's also a gradual progression.
It's like climbing a mountain. You don't just start at the summit. You start with the first steps, those sometimes shaky first steps at the bottom, and they're like base camps along the way, right?
Yeah,
Moments to catch your breath, moments to celebrate how far you've come.
that's a great analogy. So you don't need to be intimidated by the 9 stages.
Yeah.
We're going to take it step by step. And to get started, Wallace makes this distinction between empathy and compassion.
Yeah, it's subtle but really powerful. Empathy is about feeling with someone,
So,
sharing their emotions. It's like that resonance that we feel when we see someone suffering. But compassion goes a little bit further.
it's not just feeling with them, but genuinely wishing for them to be free from that suffering.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Wallace actually provides a guided meditation for cultivating compassion, where you actually shift your attention to experience in your mind another person's difficulties.
Yeah.
It's like mentally stepping into their shoes.
It's a really powerful practice because it moves us beyond just feeling sorry for someone. It's not about pity.
Right.
By experiencing their suffering in our imagination, even if it's just a little bit, it sparks a much deeper, more genuine compassion.
And that deeper compassion can then motivate us to actually do something to help.
Right.
It's not just a feeling. It becomes like a catalyst for action. So how does all this tie into the 9 stages of Shamatha?
So developing compassion is almost like a foundation for the whole path. It's about cultivating this kind and open heart, which is so essential for working with all the inevitable challenges that arise when you're meditating.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's dive into those stages. Now, just real quick, for anyone who's brand new to meditation, the object of meditation is simply a point of focus for your attention.
Right.
It could be your breath, a sound, a mental image. There's all kinds of things you can use.
Yeah.
In the early stages of Shamatha, it's completely normal for your mind to wander.
Oh, for sure.
It's like a puppy that's just been let off the leash, wants to explore everything.
It does, yeah.
So stages 1 and 2 are all about noticing those moments of distraction and gently guiding your attention back to the object.
Right.
And, I can totally relate to this because sometimes my mind is like a ping pong ball.
Oh, yeah.
It's just bouncing all over the place.
That's the experience, for sure. The key is, in these early stages, you've got to be patient with yourself. It really is like you're training a muscle.
Yeah.
Your attention muscle.
Hmm.
And like any muscle, it takes time to develop that strength and stamina.
This is where that gentle guidance comes in, right?
Right.
It's not about beating yourself up for getting distracted.
No.
It's about developing that mindful awareness
Yeah,
to notice when your mind has wandered and then gently bring it back.
exactly. And as you practice, you'll start to experience these little victories, those moments of sustained focus that feel so good, so refreshing. It's like, finally finding a quiet space in the middle of all that mental chatter.
And those moments, however brief they are, they really do keep you coming back for more.
Yeah.
It's like little glimpses of what's possible
Okay.
as you progress on this path.
Yeah.
And then we get to stage 3, resurgent attention.
Okay.
Now things start to get a little more serious, I guess.
Well, stage 3 is really where a deeper commitment comes in. You might start meditating for longer periods, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And it's not just about those formal meditation sessions. It's about carrying that mindful awareness into everyday life.
So this is where we take it off the cushion into the real world.
Right.
That sounds like a challenge.
It can be. Yeah.
How do we actually do that?
So Wallace talks about integrating mindfulness into everyday activities like eating, walking, even just brushing your teeth.
Okay.
It's about bringing that quality of awareness to even those mundane tasks, noticing the sensations sensations, the movements, the thoughts that arise.
So it's about being present, even when we're not formally meditating. But isn't that kind of exhausting? Trying to be mindful all the time.
It's not about being on all the time. It's more about finding a balance. And as you practice, you'll naturally become more aware throughout the day. But there are still going to be times when you get, caught up in distractions.
The key is to notice those moments
Yeah.
and gently redirect your attention without judging yourself, just recognizing what's happening and making a choice.
Precisely. And that's where the real transformation begins. It's not just about being able to focus for a few minutes in meditation, but developing a different way of relating to your own mind, to your experiences.
It's almost like you're becoming the observer of your own thoughts and emotions,
Yeah.
rather than being swept away by them.
That's a great way to put it. And as you cultivate that observer perspective, you start to see things with more clarity, more spaciousness. It's like the clouds part, and you get a glimpse of the blue sky behind them.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal of this. Stage 4. Close attention.
Okay.
Now, this sounds like a major milestone.
It is. Stage 4 is where you achieve freedom from completely losing the object of meditation.
Wow.
Your attention becomes so stable that it's no longer constantly getting hijacked by every random thought that pops up.
Can you imagine that? A mind that's not constantly darting around? It's almost like reaching a mountain peak where you can finally catch your breath and take in the view.
Exactly. And that view is mindfulness coming into its own. You're no longer a beginner, fumbling with the basics.
Right.
You've developed a level of mastery where you can stay present with your chosen object without getting completely lost in thought.
But I'm guessing there are still challenges, right? I mean, we have 5 more stages to go.
There are indeed. And one of those challenges is complacency. Reaching stage 4 can be such a rewarding experience
Yeah.
that it's easy to think, okay, I got this. I've arrived.
So even when we're making progress, there's always potential for the ego to kind of creep in and mess things up.
It's a subtle trap, and it can lead to stagnation, getting stuck in a comfortable rut. And the key is to recognize that shamatha is a journey, not a destination.
So even when you reach a certain level of mastery, there's always more to explore,
Absolutely.
more to deepen.
Yeah.
And that brings us to stage 5, tamed attention.
All right.
Now, this is where a new challenge arises.
Mm-hmm.
Laxity.
Uh-huh.
Laxity. What is that?
So it's that subtle tendency of the mind to sink into dullness. It's not quite sleepiness, but it's like that feeling of your attention becoming fuzzy, like you're watching the world through like a fogged up window.
Okay, I
Yeah.
can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even when I'm trying to focus, my mind just feels heavy and sluggish.
It's a common obstacle, especially as you progress through these stages. And the challenge is to counteract that laxity without tipping over into the opposite extreme, which is excitation.
Excitation. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's like finding that sweet spot
Right.
between being too relaxed and too wired.
Yeah, precisely. It's this delicate balancing act. You need to arouse your attention just enough to lift that fog of laxity,
Okay.
but not so much that your mind becomes agitated and restless.
So you know what? I'm starting to see this shamatha practice.
Yeah.
It's not just about sitting there trying to empty your mind.
Right.
It's really about understanding these subtle workings of our own attention,
Yeah,
learning to work with it skillfully.
that's a great insight. Yeah. And this understanding of attention is really key to navigating this path of shamatha. Now, speaking of understanding, Wallace points out some interesting differences between how mindfulness is traditionally understood in Buddhism and how it's often presented in modern contexts.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that too. There seems to be a lot of different interpretations of what mindfulness actually is these days.
Right. So the classic Buddhist understanding of mindfulness really emphasizes remembering and guarding an object of attention. And it often involves memory, bringing to mind specific qualities or instructions, and even making distinctions between wholesome and unwholesome mental states.
Okay. But the way I usually hear mindfulness described is more about being present and non-judgmental.
Right. Just noticing what's happening without getting caught up in it.
Right. That's more of a modern emphasis. And it's not necessarily wrong, but it's definitely a different flavor of mindfulness than that more traditional approach.
So does that mean we're doing mindfulness wrong? Or that one way is better than the other?
It's not about right or wrong. It's more about recognizing that there are different ways of understanding and practicing mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And each approach has its own potential benefits.
This makes me wonder, how does this shift in understanding affect the way we practice? I mean, if mindfulness can be both about remembering specific instructions and about non-judgmental awareness, how do we know which approach to use?
That's a great question. And it's really something to explore as you deepen your practice. What's important is to be aware of these different perspectives and to find what resonates with you, what feels most beneficial for your own path.
It's like having a toolbox with different mindfulness techniques.
And we can choose which tool is most appropriate for the task at hand.
Exactly. And that brings us to a fascinating shift that happens as we move into those later stages of shamatha. So instead of focusing on the breath, the focus shifts to something called a mental acquired sign.
A mental acquired sign. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's basically a mental image that spontaneously arises as your attention stabilizes. It can appear differently to different people. Sometimes it's a star or a flower or even the moon.
Wow, so it's like your mind generates its own symbol of focused attention.
It does, yeah.
That's wild. But how does that even happen?
It's not something you force. It's more like a natural unfolding as your mind settles and becomes more refined. Think of it like this. You've spent so much time training your attention that your mind naturally gravitates towards a point of focus.
Okay.
And that focus takes on this symbolic form.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. It's almost like your mind is saying, hey, look at how focused I am. Here's a little visual representation of that focus.
Right, exactly. And this shift marks a turning point where the practice becomes even more internalized, more refined.
Okay.
It's like you're moving from working with the gross level of the breath to a more subtle level of mental imagery.
So we've got this shift in focus, and we've got these 9 stages to navigate. But let's be real for a moment. Wallace talks about these 6 prerequisites for successful shamatha training, and some of them sound, well, pretty intense. Like, remember that story about the bed bugs in India?
Ah, yes.
The bed bugs.
The bed bug story. It's a classic. It highlights the importance of a supportive environment. So Wallace was trying to practice in India, and he was constantly battling dead bugs, and it made it almost impossible to concentrate.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's definitely not conducive to a peaceful mind.
Right.
But what about the other prerequisites?
Yeah.
You mentioned a few earlier, like, few desires, contentment, limited activities. These sound like, ideal conditions for a monk in a cave, not for someone like me, living in the modern world.
Well, it's true that those conditions are more conducive to deep practice. But Wallace emphasizes that we can apply those principles to our modern lives as well. It's about recognizing how our lifestyle choices and our daily habits can either support or hinder our efforts to cultivate that balanced mind.
So it's not about becoming a recluse, but it's about making conscious choices that align with our aspirations for inner peace,
Yeah.
and clarity.
Right.
Like maybe we don't need to go live in a cave, but we could make an effort to, I don't know, simplify our lives, to reduce distractions, to cultivate contentment with what we have.
Exactly. And that's where the practice of equanimity comes in. It's the antidote to that constant craving for more, that feeling of never having enough.
Equanimity.
Yeah.
Isn't that about being calm and composed?
It's more than just that. Equanimity is about cultivating this sense of impartiality towards all beings, letting go of those concentric rings of attachment that we tend to operate within. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things and seeing beyond those arbitrary boundaries that we create between ourselves and others.
Okay, that's a pretty big concept.
It is.
How do we even begin to cultivate equanimity? I mean, we're bombarded with messages that tell us to strive for more, to be better, to achieve more.
Yeah, it's tough. Wallace shares a really powerful anecdote about an alternative graduation ceremony that he attended. So as he was looking out at the graduating students, all strangers to him, he had this realization that they could just as easily have been his close friends or family if circumstances had been different.
Wait, so he's saying that our sense of connection to others, even those we consider strangers, is largely a matter of circumstance.
It is.
It's a pretty radical idea.
It is, and it challenges us to question those arbitrary boundaries that we create between ourselves and others, to see the shared humanity that connects us all.
So how do we actually apply this insight? I mean, how do we start to see strangers as potential loved ones?
Well, it's a gradual process, but one way to start is to cultivate compassion towards all beings, just as we discussed earlier.
Right.
To recognize that everyone is experiencing their own joys and sorrows, their own struggles and triumphs.
It's like shifting our perspective from us and them to we're all in this together.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
It frees us from the burden of clinging to our own narrow sense of self and opens us up to this wider, more interconnected experience of reality.
This is really making me think. I'm starting to see how shamatha is about so much more than just training your attention.
Yeah.
It's about transforming your whole way of being in the world.
That's precisely it. And to illustrate this point further, Wallace shares another story about his encounter with this Tibetan recluse, Jen Yanwagvi.
Oh, I remember reading about that. This recluse was like, a real-life embodiment of equanimity and unconditional love, right?
Yeah, exactly. John Wagvi just radiated this profound sense of peace and acceptance, this deep understanding that transcended all concepts and judgments. It's a glimpse into a level of realization that's possible through dedicated practice.
So even though this level of realization might seem, really far off, it's inspiring to know that it's actually attainable, that through
Yeah.
practice, we can cultivate these qualities of equanimity and unconditional love within ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this path of shamatha.
Yeah.
It's a journey of self-discovery, of uncovering the hidden potential that lies within each of us. It's about recognizing that true well-being is not something that we need to search for outside ourselves. It's already present within us, just waiting to be cultivated and brought to fruition.
Okay, so we've explored the first 5 stages of shamatha. And I'm already feeling like there's so much to unpack here and practice, but I'm also really curious about what happens as you go deeper on this path.
Hmm.
We touched on the idea of settling the mind in its natural state a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
It sounds like a totally different approach to meditation than what I'm used to.
It is, in a way, yeah. It's a method that's particularly helpful for those of us who, find our minds are constantly buzzing with thoughts and emotions and to-do lists, all that stuff.
Oh, so you're talking about me.
Right.
Yeah, my mind is definitely a busy place. Sometimes it feels like a whirlwind in there.
That's something a lot of people experience. But here's the thing. Settling the mind in its natural state isn't about forcing your mind to be quiet. It's more about recognizing that underneath all that mental chatter, there's this deeper ground of stillness and clarity.
I love that image. This deeper ground of stillness. It's like discovering a hidden oasis in the middle of a bustling city. But
Yeah.
how do we actually access that stillness?
Well, we're fortunate to have the guidance of a 19th century master, Dodruption, whose instructions on this are really profound and insightful.
I'm ready to soak up some wisdom.
Uh,
What does Dodruption have to say about this practice?
One of the first things that Dodruption emphasizes is the importance of actual practice, not just going through the motions or getting caught up in the semblance of meditation.
Okay, so it's not enough to just sit there and look like we're meditating.
Right.
There needs to be a genuine internal effort.
Exactly. He reminds us that simply knowing the techniques or being able to, talk about meditation intellectually isn't enough. It's the consistent, dedicated effort, the moment-to-moment practice that leads to real transformation. It's like the difference between reading a cookbook and actually cooking a meal. You might have all the knowledge, but you need to get in the kitchen and apply it to actually experience the results.
That's a great analogy. So it's not about passively absorbing information, but actively engaging with the practice. And speaking of engaging with the practice, what about those great hopes and fears that Dodruption cautions against?
Oh, right, yeah. He wisely advises us to avoid getting swept away by expectations about the outcomes. It's about letting go of that, striving for results, and simply being present with the practice itself.
That's something I struggle with in all areas of my life, not just meditation.
Mhm.
I'm always thinking about the next goal, the next accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's like I can't just enjoy the journey. I'm always focused on the destination.
It's a very common tendency in our achievement-oriented culture. But what disruption is pointing to is a different way of being, a way of finding fulfillment in the present moment, in the process itself.
So it's about embracing the journey, the ups and downs, the moments of clarity and the moments of confusion as all part of the path. That's a beautiful idea, but it also sounds incredibly challenging.
It is, but it's a challenge worth embracing. And to help us navigate this path, Disruption offers this incredibly potent phrase to guide our practice. He says, without distraction and without grasping. It's like a mantra for navigating this inner landscape of the mind.
Okay, let's break that down. So without distraction, I'm guessing that refers to all those times when our minds wander off, lost in thought.
Precisely, yeah. It's about gently bringing our attention back to the present moment. Whenever it wanders off into, thoughts about the past, worries about the future, or even elaborate daydreams about the present.
And without grasping, what does that mean?
So it reminds us to avoid clinging to any thought, feeling, or sensation that arises. It's about observing those mental events with a sense of spaciousness and non-attachment, allowing them to come and go without getting caught up in their stories.
It's like those meditation apps that tell you to imagine your thoughts as clouds passing by.
Right.
You don't try to hold on to them or control them or push them away. You just observe them with a sense of openness and curiosity.
Exactly. And as you practice this, you start to realize that you are not your thoughts.
Right.
You are the awareness that is aware of those thoughts.
Wow, that's a pretty mind-blowing realization. It's like you're stepping outside of the whirlwind of your mind and finding this place of stillness and clarity within yourself.
That's the power of this practice. It helps us to disentangle ourselves from that constant stream of thoughts and emotions and to experience this deeper level of peace and freedom.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. We're cultivating stable attention, we're letting go of grasping, we're settling the mind in its natural state. But Drubchen also talks about finding the right balance of mental arousal, right? What's that all about?
Yeah, he compares it to tuning the strings of a lute,
Okay.
finding that sweet spot where the strings are neither too tight nor too loose. If the strings are too tight, they'll snap. If they're too loose, they won't produce a clear sound. It's the same with the mind.
So if our minds are too constricted, we're creating tension and exhaustion. And if we let them become too slack, we kind of slip into dullness and lose clarity.
Exactly. It's that delicate dance between effort and ease, focus and relaxation that we're constantly refining as we progress through the stages of shamatha.
I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes when I meditate, I find myself getting so focused on like doing it right that I tense up and I end up feeling more stressed than when I started.
Yeah.
Other times my mind just feels like it's drifting off to sleep. Finding that balance is definitely a challenge.
It's a challenge, but it's also a skill that can be developed through practice. And Dudge Ripchen reminds us that this balance extends beyond the cushion. Our diet, our behavior, our lifestyle choices can also either support or hinder our practice.
This is where it gets really practical, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about those dedicated meditation sessions. It's about cultivating a mindful awareness that permeates our daily lives.
Precisely. It influences the choices that we make, the way we interact with others, the way we care for ourselves. It's about recognizing that the path to inner peace isn't something we compartmentalize. It's this ongoing process of integration and transformation.
So we're talking about bringing the principles of shamatha, this stability, clarity, and equanimity into every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big undertaking, but it also sounds incredibly rewarding.
It is. And as we delve deeper into this practice of settling the mind, a fascinating phenomenon might arise: the experience of empty forms.
Empty forms. Okay, now you're really piquing my curiosity. What are empty forms?
So Wallace explains that as our minds calm down and the grip of conceptual grasping loosens, we might begin to perceive physical objects in a different way. The solidity that we typically attribute to them starts to dissolve,
Okay.
and they appear more as like transparent, ephemeral appearances.
It's like seeing the world through new eyes, recognizing this impermanent, ever-changing nature of reality.
Exactly. And this shift in perception can extend to our own bodies as well. We might experience a sense of our physical form as less solid, more like an interconnected flow of sensations.
Wow, that's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It challenges those deeply ingrained notions of self and other, subject and object. It's like realizing that the boundaries that we perceive between ourselves and the world are not as solid as we think they are.
That's a great insight. And this realization can be incredibly liberating. It frees us from the illusion of separateness and allows us to experience a deeper sense of connection to all things.
I can see how that would be a profound experience, but it also sounds a bit intimidating. I mean, if everything is empty, what does that even mean? Do we just dissolve into nothingness?
It's not about dissolving into nothingness. It's more about recognizing the emptiness as a ground of possibility, a space of infinite potential.
Okay, so it's not about things ceasing to exist, but about seeing them in a new light, recognizing their true nature as impermanent and interconnected.
Exactly. And another remarkable experience that might emerge from this practice is a sense that nothing can truly harm the mind.
Wait, what do you mean? Does that mean we become invincible or immune to physical pain?
Not exactly. It's more about a shift in perspective. It's about recognizing that the true source of suffering lies not in external events, but in our own mental and emotional reactions to those events.
So it's not the things that happen to us that cause suffering, but our own interpretations of those events, our own clinging, our own resistance.
Precisely. Dodropchen puts it beautifully when he says, "Sticks and stones may break your bones, but appearances to the mind cannot harm you if you don't grasp onto them, identify with them, and thereby empower them."
That's a powerful statement. It's a reminder that we have the power to choose how we respond to challenges, to cultivate this sense of inner resilience and equanimity that allows us to navigate the ups and downs of life with greater ease and grace. It's like realizing that we don't have to be victims of our circumstances. We can choose to respond with wisdom and compassion, even in the midst of difficulty.
That's the essence of what shamatha is all about. Cultivating a mind that is stable, clear, and free. A mind that's capable of resting in the present moment, embracing all experiences with openness and equanimity.
This is truly inspiring. I'm starting to see that shamatha is not just a set of techniques, but a path of profound transformation. It's about cultivating this deep intimacy with our own minds, exploring this vast landscape of our inner world, and uncovering those innate qualities of clarity, peace, and well-being that reside within us all.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we continue on this journey of exploration, let's remember that the true measure of progress lies not in achieving some extraordinary state, but in the gradual cultivation of a more peaceful, present, and balanced mind.
Wow, we've really gone deep, haven't we, into the heart of shamatha meditation,
Yeah.
from those first kind of like wobbly steps of noticing distraction
Right.
to the kind of mind-bending, possibility of experiencing empty forms. It feels like we've covered so much in such a short amount of time.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much depth to this practice.
Uh-huh.
And I know we've only just scratched the surface. I'm starting to see shamatha not just as a meditation technique, but as a whole way of life.
Yeah.
Like a path to really transforming our relationship with ourselves and with the world around us. But I have to admit, a part of me still wonders how much of this stuff is actually applicable to like everyday life.
Right.
I mean, most of us aren't monks living in like secluded caves.
Yeah.
We've got jobs and families and responsibilities and, all that. How do we integrate these like profound insights and practices into the hustle and bustle of, modern living?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And thankfully, Wallace addresses this directly. He emphasizes that these principles of shamatha, cultivating stability, clarity, and equanimity, they're not meant to be confined to, the meditation cushion.
So it's not about escaping the world, but about bringing these qualities into the world,
Right.
into our interactions with other people, into our work, our creative pursuits, even those kind of mundane daily tasks that often feel like a chore.
Precisely. Imagine approaching that challenging work project with the same focus, the same attention that you cultivate during meditation.
Yeah.
Or navigating, like, a difficult conversation with a sense of calm composure,
Right.
rather than getting swept away by reactivity.
Or even just like being fully present with your loved ones, really listening without judgment,
Right.
offering a kind word or a gesture. It's like
Mhm.
those moments of mindfulness that we're cultivating in meditation can start to like spill over into every aspect of our lives.
Exactly. It's about bringing that same quality of mindful awareness, that spaciousness, that clarity to every moment, whether we're sitting in meditation or walking the dog or stuck in traffic.
I'm starting to see how this could be, truly revolutionary. It's not about becoming some kind of like Zen master who never experiences, stress or frustration,
Yeah.
but about developing a different way of relating to those experiences,
Yeah.
a way that allows us to navigate the ups and downs of life with more grace and resilience.
It's like you're building this inner sanctuary that you can always access no matter what's happening out there in the external world. A place of peace and stability that can help you weather the storms.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize that the benefits of shamatha are not just for like some select few who dedicate their lives to meditation.
Right.
They're available to anyone who's willing to put in the effort.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the effort doesn't have to be like monumental. Wallace reminds us that even a few minutes a day of meditation can make a difference.
Right.
It's like exercising a muscle.
It is, yeah.
The more we practice, the stronger our attention gets.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I can definitely commit to a few minutes a day. But what about those times when it feels like I'm not making any progress?
Yeah.
When my mind is still like a whirlwind of thoughts and distractions.
Well, it's important to remember that the path of meditation is not always linear. There will be ups and downs. There will be moments of clarity and moments of confusion. The key is to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Keep practicing and trust the process.
That's good advice. I tend to get discouraged easily,
Hmm.
especially when I, compare myself to other people who seem to be further along on the path.
Yeah. Right.
But I guess it's about focusing on my own journey, celebrating my own progress, and remembering that, even small steps can lead to significant transformation.
Absolutely. And as we cultivate greater attentional stability, we actually create space for other qualities to emerge. Deeper insights, greater compassion, a more profound sense of connection to ourselves and the world around us. It's like we're clearing away all the mental clutter to reveal the treasures that have always been there.
This has been such an incredible journey.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of, what attention is and how we can train it to create a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
I agree. It's been a joy to explore this path with you, and I encourage everyone to continue this exploration, experiment with the techniques we've discussed, maybe dive deeper into the teachings of B. Alan Wallace and other wise teachers,
Yeah.
and most importantly, trust your own experience.
That's great advice. And for our listeners who are just, beginning to dip their toes into the world of meditation, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
The path of meditation is a journey, not a destination. It's about cultivating a gentle and compassionate awareness of your own mind, moment by moment. And remember, even those small steps can lead to profound transformation.
That's such an inspiring message. And as we conclude this deep dive into the world of Shamatha meditation, I hope you'll join us in carrying these insights and practices into your own lives. Experiment with the techniques, explore the depth of your own mind, and discover the transformative potential that lies within each of us.
And who knows, maybe along the way, we'll even dissolve that illusory barrier between inner and outer,
Mhm.
experiencing a reality that's far richer and more interconnected than we ever imagined possible.
Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep cultivating that precious gift of attention.
And remember, the revolution begins within.